Hello friends, and welcome to my channel. This video will be about one of my personal favorite aircraft, the Russian-built twin-engine fighter, the Sukhoi Su-27 Flanker B in the modernized SM version. For this build, I choose the 1:72 scale Zvezda kit for its great molding, high quality details and perfect fit. The Zvezda manufacturer did a very good job with their new kits in the last few years. I know that because I built a Su-27SM and a MiG-29S a few years ago. So I am pretty happy for them and I hope I will enjoy this build. In this build, I will upgrade the Flanker with a Fuselage cockpit and extra metal parts from Eduard. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for not missing any new notifications. Alright, let's start with the build. I began to build the Flanker with the cockpit. First, I had to clean all parts with a sharp knife and sand it down with a sandpaper. The kit instruction leads to glue all cockpit parts together, but I need to cut out some plastic parts and replace them with the Eduard metal parts. The metal parts are glued with a super glue. In this process, I must be very careful and glue the parts precisely in place. Before I glue the Fuselage parts, all plastic cockpit parts must be painted and weathered. The cockpit is painted with Mr. Color 115 light blue color. Now, I mask the cockpit and paint the instrument cover and the ejection seat with a black semi-gloss color. Next, I add a layer of clear varnish. Now, I weathered the cockpit with a dark brown wash. Mostly I use washes from Mick Jimenez. For black painted cockpit parts, I will use a medium grey panoline wash. To speeding up the work on the wash, I will use a hairdryer. Oil washes can dry for a longer time. I don't want to wait so long. A hairdryer is a very good option for fast drying. The excessive wash is removed with an emerald thinner. For this procedure, I use a cotton swab. At the end of the weathering, I apply a dark grey and metallic dry brush. All cockpit parts are weathered. Now I can start to glue the Fuselage parts. First, comes the avionics side panels. This procedure is a little bit stressful. The superglue is aggressive and I must be very focused. One mistake and I can destroy the whole cockpit. Next, I glue the vertical stabilizer control pedals and assemble the instrument panel. Now I glue the instrument panel into the cockpit and work on the side panels and throttle. The ejection seat is full of small pieces. Its assembly took me about 2 hours to complete. The Eduard photo etch part will bring any cockpit to life. I am very satisfied with the assembly. Finally, I can assemble the whole cockpit together and glue it to the fuselage. I will upgrade the landing gear shafts with metal parts, small cables and hydraulic hoses. Before I start to paint them, I must apply a layer of surfacer, otherwise the color can chip off from the metal parts. After surfacing, I apply a light gray color and weather the gear shaft with oil washes. The cabling assembly was a little bit tricky. I had to use superglue. The next step are the Archip Julka AL31 engines. I painted with a burnt iron and white cream colors. Once again, for weathering, I use a dark brown wash from Mick Jimenez. The engines are ready for assembly. This is the last step before I start to work on the flanker's fuselage. The upper fuselage is made out of 2 sections. The rear fuel tank and engine section is identical with all Su-27 models. The front section is optional between a single-seater and a twin-seater UB version. For the fuselage assembly I use Rebel contactor glue and Mr. Cement S. This fuselage assembly part is the most crucial. The fit must be perfect. I take my time and glue each side slowly one by one. Before I glue the wings into the fuselage, I decided to cut out the flaperons out of the moldings. The instruction manual has two options with the front wings leading edges. One is closed, the second extended. I choose for the extended version of the leading edges and flaperons. I cut the flaperons with a sharp cutting knife. I must be very careful and cut it slowly. Now I sand the flaperons with a P320 and P600 sandpaper. The flaperons are finished, so I can glue the wings and leading edges into the fuselage. The Eduard metal parts also includes launch rails for weapons hardpoints. I plan to equip the Flanker with air-to-air missiles, so I probably use them in another project. The radar cone needed extra weight, so I added a piece of lead with PVA glue. Now it's time to work on the air inlets and jet turbines. The metal parts will accompany me in the entire building process. The air intakes are painted with Mr. Color 325 light gray color. After painting, I assembled the air intakes and glued them to the fuselage. Next, I work on the rear stabilizer control winglets and small engine metal parts and antennas. The smallest parts such as antennas are always a big challenge for a modeler, so I'm very happy when I managed to glue it for the first time. The flanker's assembly is slowly coming to its end. Now I glue the missile hardpoints and work on the cockpit canopy. The front cockpit canopy assembly is a little bit tricky. First, I glue the photo etch heads-up display with PVA glue. I don't use super glue for the clear cockpit parts. It can badly etch the surface. Now I slowly glue the clear part and gently press it to the fuselage. The modernized SM version has the infrared search and track system placed not in the middle of the front canopy frame, but on the right side like the newer Su-33 or 35. The model is ready for filling. For filling the gaps and imperfections, I use Mr. White putty. For better applying, I dilute the putty in a mix ratio 1:1 to mix the leveling thinner. The putty will dry for some hours. Meanwhile, I work on the air-to-air missiles. For this project, I will equip the Flanker with 4 R-73s, 2 R-27ET heat-seeking, and 4 radar-guided R-27ER missiles. The putty dries out after a few hours, and now I sand it down underwater with a P600 and P1000 sandpaper. Before surfacing, I need to mask all painted parts such as landing gear shafts, air intakes, jet turbines, and cockpit canopy with Italian masking tape and Mick Jimenez liquid mask. Now I glue all small antennas and sensors. The model is ready for surfacing. For this procedure, I use Mr. Surfacer 1000. After applying, let the surface dry for a couple of hours. When the surface dries out, I apply a panoline pre-shading to imitate shades on the aircraft. Before I start to paint the camouflage, I must paint the engine color with metallic steel paint. I add a smooth layer of blue and red steel colors to imitate weathered metal. Now I mask the engine colors with masking tape. I decided to paint the model with a light and dark blue camouflage scheme. It represents the machine Red 04 from the 4th Air Force Training Center placed in Lipetsk Air Force Base. For this camouflage, I will use Mr. Color 323 light blue, 65 bright blue, and white number 1 color. The paint is diluted in a mix of 1:4 ratio to leveling thinner. For this paint job, I use my Chromax BD130 airbrush with 0.2 mm nozzle. Upper blue paint is a combination of 323 light blue and 65 bright blue in a ratio of 80 to 20%. Now I will show you how to use a masking putty. Take a small bit of a putty between your fingers and roll it into a noodle. Apply the masking putty on the surface of the model part and form it into a needed shape. Next, mask the already painted areas with masking tape. Now you can apply another camouflage paint. And that's it. Easy. The radar cone is painted with white number 1 color. I added another layer of masking tape. This time I masked the air brake shaft, small gaps between the leading edges and flaperons, and painted with a light grey color. The flanker's paint job is finished, so I seal it with a layer of Mr. Color GX100 Super Clear Varnish. Now I apply decals. The original decals from the box are okay, but don't wait too long with the applying. It can happen that they start to fall apart when you let them longer wet. Next, I seal the decals with a layer of clear varnish. The varnish dries completely after an hour, so I can start with the weathering. First, I apply a dark grey panel line wash. For faster drying time, I use the hairdryer. Now I can remove the panel line wash with a paper towel. The wash creates a darker tone not only in the panel lines, but also on the surface. The next step is weathering. I checked out a lot of pictures of the Red 04 and its camouflage did age a lot. The camouflage has started to fade out from weather conditions such as sun, rain and snow. There are also a remarkable lot of grease and dirt areas on the top and the low part of the aircraft. First, I started to weather each panel with white oil paint. Some panels are more faded than others, so I can create a nice contrast between them. Upper and lower fuselage is dirty from hydraulic oil leaks and dirt. For oil leaks I took my time. It was a bit challenging because I'm still learning new techniques. There is chip of paint by the wing's leading edges. I simply create them with a paintbrush. Now I can seal the weathering with a super clear varnish. The main paint job and weathering on the flanker is finished. Now I can work on the landing gear, wheels and landing gear covers. For better painting of the wheel rings, I use the Tamiya modeling template. I highly recommend this helpful tool for everyone who has issues with painting wheel rims by hand. Next, I work on the painting of the hydraulic hoses, gear covers and varnishing. After varnishing, I weather all parts with a dark brown oil wash and clean it with a cotton swab. Now I can assemble the landing gear. This is probably the only thing I would blame the Zvezda kit for. Some parts are too ridiculously small and difficult to work with. The smallest parts are at least 3 mm long. Many landing gear cover hinges and opening pistons of the gear base. I upgraded the main landing gear with Eduard metal parts imitating electric cables and hydraulic hoses for the brake system. The next step are the jet nozzles. First, I paint the nozzles with a mix of black and burnt iron color. Then, I paint the inner side with a light cream color to imitate burnt off nozzles from the afterburner. Now, I add a layer of clear varnish and weather the nozzles with oil paints and washes. After weathering is complete, I seal the nozzles with a matte varnish. Next, I work on the missiles. I paint the missile winglets with chrome silver paint and cover them with masking tape. I paint the missiles with a gloss white color, add a layer of varnish and weather them with panaline wash. Finally, I can assemble the flanker together. First, I glue the landing gear and gear covers in place. Next, I glue the R27ER, R27ET and the R77 missiles on their hardpoints. Now I glue the jet nozzles, horizontal and vertical stabilizers. For once in all my Sukhoi family collection, I let the big air brake open. At the end of the build, I work on the cockpit canopy. Alright, the Sukhoi Su-27SM Flanker B is finished. This build went by itself and was a lot of fun. I hope you liked this video. Please subscribe to my channel, like, or if you want to ask me something about my hobby or this build, leave me a comment. I will answer your question. Also, if you want to follow my work, you can join me on Facebook or Instagram. There is a link in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.